Thank you very much. Please, panelists, join the stage. You can continue to applaud them, please. Okay, and one more microphone over there for you. Thank you. Please have a seat. Yes, the crunches are working. Okay, so before we start, I just want to know who is a startup founder or works for a startup in the room. Can you raise your hand? That's interesting. This is Game of Startup. I'm with an amazing group of panelists today. I'm just going to say, who they are in case you don't know. Next to me, I have Roxanne Varza, who is the director at Station F in Paris. Then we have Yoram Wijngaarde, who is the founder and CEO of Dear Room, based in Amsterdam. Next to him, we have Zagury, who is the co-founder and CEO of TheFamily, also out of Paris. And Connor, who is the managing director of Techstars Berlin, and can do amazing things with the crunches, as you can see. Maybe if we get confident, we can talk about how you made that. So starting straight away, I wanted to understand, what is individually, so you're going to have like maximum 1 minute to tell us and explain to the people here, what is your perspective and what is your special thesis? Like what's different between your organizations? What is your take on, this main question that we're going to discuss today, which is how we can support startup founders in Europe? What are the main challenges around talent, around diversity, and other questions that we will raise throughout the panel? I see that Alice doesn't have a microphone, but I'm going to ask you first. What is so special about TheFamily? What is your perspective on that question of entrepreneurs?
So what is special about TheFamily? Hi, everyone. I'm very happy to be here. So I'm the founder and CEO of TheFamily. TheFamily, I started it 6 years ago to fight against what I call toxicity, which is pessimism, elitism, the lack of ambition in our European ecosystem. We are fully independent. I have 2 other co-founders. Today we are 45 employees dedicated to help hundreds of startups every year. So it's been 6 years, 600 startups. 150 are still alive. And you may know some of them, like Algolia, Payfit, Fretlink, Agricool, for instance. What we bring is education, tools, and access to capital to all these founders. And that's it.
So toxicity will be the key word to keep in mind. So fighting against it. Connor, what's special about Techstars?
I'm not sure. I think the official answer is Techstars is a worldwide network that helps entrepreneurs succeed. And that network's organized in 3 ways. So at the grassroots level, we have the community aspect of Techstars, which is, you might have heard of Startup Weekend or Startup Week. So there's over 1,000 events happening all over the world at grassroots level, whether it's France, Germany, Ireland, Japan, even war zones like Syria. They've experienced Startup Weekends, which is great because it's communities coming together at the idea stage and founders coming together to helping more entrepreneurs come into the ecosystem. Once the company's developed further, where we started, our origins is around Techstars Accelerator. And the Accelerator is started in 2007 when the world didn't exist. I think it was YC and Techstars around the same time. It was called a boot camp at the time. And that's now grown to over 48 different accelerators around the world in different geographies and different verticals. And I can talk more about that. And then finally, we have, to help you all the way through from that idea to accelerate to actually scaling phase, we have a VC arm, which then Techstars Ventures supports those companies that have graduated from the accelerator all the way through to IPO. And we've had the first companies such as like SendGrid, which all the way through that process from acceleration through IPO, the first accelerator-backed IPO company. And we've been in Berlin now for a few years. We're in Paris, Amsterdam, Munich, Oslo, in energy, London in finance, and in the city program, and now in Lisbon as well, and Tel Aviv in the European kind of ecosystem. Yeah.
So as keywords, we could say that it's global, like you have location everywhere, super early, and also investing, which TheFamily is also doing.
Yeah.
Summarizing.
Summary, worldwide network helping entrepreneurs succeed. Yeah.
Mic drop. We can just stop it there. No, sorry. Yoram, next to your turn. So you're the only one here, I would say, who is helping entrepreneurs, but indirectly in a sense, and you're an entrepreneur yourself.
Yeah, that's right. So Deal Room is Europe's largest startup database. We track millions of companies, of which roughly 150,000 in Europe have been identified as startups and scale-ups. Our clients are not startups, they are more VCs and large corporates and governments. But we've always made it a mission to also support the European ecosystem. So that's why we provide most of our tools for free if you are a startup founder. So I would say the key ingredient that we bring to the ecosystem is transparency and information.
Very good. Thank you. We have the keywords. Roxanne, what's special about Station F?
So Station F, for a lot of people who may have heard of that big startup space in Paris, we are a mega campus in the center of Paris for startups. So literally the Eiffel Tower laying down. We have a massive space, and we filled it with literally all the resources that a young company would need to get started. We put a whole ecosystem there. We have 30 different programs, 1,000 companies actually working out of our space, 1,013 actually at this very moment. We have a VC community with over 40 investment funds. We have 30 different public services. We have a maker space. And we announced last week actually housing. So now 600 of the 3,000 entrepreneurs that work at Station F can actually have a accessible, low-cost housing offer as well, because we know housing is super complicated. So I think really our approach is resource. We want to put the absolute best resources possible in front of the entrepreneurs and do that with an entire ecosystem.
So resource and space could be the keywords. Preparing this panel, we were discussing this sort of game of startups. There are some connection with Game of Thrones. Actually, I tried the panelists. Only one is kind of expert with that particular series. And so the next question will be for you, Connor, but please everyone jump in. If we look at what's going on here in Europe compared to the States, compared to Asia, let's say that San Francisco is like the king's land. And when they come here to Europe, they kind of go to the north, right? They're like uncharted spaces. What's going on here? And actually, I've been interacting with VCs from the Valley, and it's actually the case. It's like, I don't understand anything what's going on here. So can you tell us what do we have or what do we need to beat those kingdoms, when they are coming to the north? Like, what is at stake here in Europe?
Really good.
It's working, yeah. People are like, yeah.
Really good Wi-Fi. I watched a lot of Game of Thrones recently. I was in hospital for a few days, so I got all of the last season, so I got very up to speed on Game of Thrones. Everybody dies, basically. So we're hoping with startups that we don't die, so we have a much happier ending. And winter coming is probably the funding shortfall if the economy changes.
Wait, this one is for after.
Oh, is that for later? Yeah. Okay. Well, to be honest, the King's Landing, whatever, like San Francisco is the undoubted capital of the ecosystem globally. And if you watch Game of Thrones, everything goes through there. And then there's these other kingdoms, and then there's other areas that are becoming more important in the world map. And I think Europe is one of them. And then we're more fragmented. We have to travel further. We have smaller markets. We have less wealth. We have less armies, whatever you want to talk about in terms of the resources. I'm going to move off to Game of Thrones analogy because it's just too confusing. But I think just in this week alone, I had this morning I had an investor from India. He came here today and he's looking for meeting portfolio companies here, meeting VCs here. He wants to invest in his Indian companies and bring them out here. He's had a few unicorns. He wants to bring them to Europe for accessing enterprise SaaS. Yesterday, I had an investor from Japan who came here, and I met up with him, and he's coming here looking for deal flow, but also business development opportunities. So I think Europe's on the map, and I think the only challenge with Europe is San Francisco is hugely concentrated, and obviously you've got New York and a few other cities, but we're very diverse in terms of Paris, London, Berlin, Stockholm, then you got Tel Aviv. So we have to get on a plane and do a bit more work and travel a lot more. So I'd say our community is quite rich, but it's quite fragmented. Whereas in San Francisco, you can walk out your door and it's right there. So it's really just a geographic challenge, I would say. But in terms of talent and opportunity, I'm quite optimistic. And you see more American investors coming over here to talk about it being cheaper here, more capital efficient here. But I think then it's still a 12-hour time difference if you want to be a board member. So I think it's great to raise your seed in Series A here, and then at that point, attack the US market when one of the founders would move over there. Like you would attack the Indian market or the Chinese market, or if you're an American, attacking the European market maybe.
You talk about something that is actually potentially an issue, but also a strength, is that fragmentation. You want to react, maybe Alice or Roxanne, about that particular point? And you, as you open the family in Berlin and London, I'm sure you learned a lot of things along the way.
There is a story I just want to share. At the very beginning, I was, in 2011, very inspired by Y Combinator. I knew nothing about technology, and I just thought, oh wow, out of this infrastructure, you have a Dropbox and Airbnb. It's a success machine. Let's copy and paste this for the first time in France. And obviously, I tried, I did my best. So it was before TheFamily. And I learned a lot, but you cannot copy and paste this model because our context is so different. And that's the toxicity I was talking about. We don't have this give back mindset first, and we have paternalism. There are many things that we don't have, and many things that we have. And actually, fragmentation can be seen as an opportunity. And that's what I've discovered with TheFamily. So at TheFamily, what we see is that we are in London, Paris, Berlin, and Brussels. We shouldn't be competitive in between these different ecosystems. Money is in London. If you want to raise funds, you have to deal with the investors in London. COOs and the experience of the logistics is here in Berlin. Designers and engineers are in Paris. So basically what we tell our startup is to pick what they need and to start getting out of this mindset of there is one nation against another one. And really forcing them to travel, and to go from Paris to Berlin just to do business. And these are mental barriers that we can easily overcome, but it takes time, it takes experience. That's what I wanted to add about the fragmentation.
Yeah, I just want to jump on the back of that. Totally agree with Alice, and I also want to say I've never watched an episode of Game of Thrones, so all of the kingdoms and stuff you mentioned, I have no idea what we're talking about. No, actually, I think it's really important also to stop always looking at Silicon Valley and San Francisco as the leader. I think there's a lot of things that they actually get wrong and a lot of things that we actually get right. I'm allowed to say that, I'm from Palo Alto. And I think that we're starting to see a lot of changes. We already mentioned a lot of investors are coming over here and seeing differences. We actually had Jack Dorsey at Station F not too long ago. Twitter is putting a ton of engineers on the ground in France because it's too expensive to keep them in San Francisco. And so I think we're going to continue to see this going forward. We're now seeing also it's easier to raise early stage capital in France, was not the case a few years ago. So we're starting to actually see at Station F, a lot of companies are leaving San Francisco, are unfortunately also leaving the UK with Brexit. They're leaving places that they would have traditionally gone, and they're in search of new locations that are equally easy and accessible to build their businesses. So I think we shouldn't always keep looking at the kingdom as a place that's fixed.
Very good. That's perfect transition for the next question. I'd like to ask it to the master of whispers, who is Yoram over there. Basically, these groups that we have, I think, even if you're working with data, one of the strengths of those organizations, so Family, Techstars, Station F, that you're playing at a human, sort of level. So it's really about, the sort of connection that you're building that you can help also the startup founders through mentorships with different type of programs, etc. Would like to get, this data approach to see, okay, what's, coming next, and particularly in Europe. I know that all of us here are saying, oh, Europe is great, best moment ever. But also a lot of people telling me that winter is coming. Like, this is really like the term that they will use, not only because of the show, because actually, is there a crisis coming up? Okay, so you have data, you have a lot of data. Is it the case?
What we're seeing, what the data is showing is that the amount of investment in Europe is going into record after record. So the last quarter, the previous quarter was a new record. Last year was a new record. So it's only going up, it seems. Also the amount, so that's money invested in startups. A lot of that is going into really big startups that are almost not startups anymore. And if you look at early stage, the trend is not as strong, but it's still going up. Also, the amount of venture capital that's being raised throughout Europe is reaching new records, even in the UK, but in France also, and in Germany. So from that perspective, not. But I do also hear people say, like, it's become harder to launch and fund a startup. So there's a disconnect between those two data points. And I think what's happening is that the standards are getting higher. Also, Housing is getting more expensive in all the key tech hubs. Salaries are going up. So the amount of money that you need to raise to launch a startup is going up. It's becoming more expensive. So if you're not a technical founder, let's say you have a business background, then and you're a first-time founder, you don't have a track record, then I think it's true that it has become a lot harder. But it's not really due to a crisis, but it's more the result of just the level has gone up.
Yeah, Connor, you want to react to this?
Yeah, I think one of the real advantages we have, and for every founder in the room, is the future of work is changing. It's actually changed already. So I think remote working is a massive opportunity now as well. So I'm working on a new startup at the moment as well, and 10 years ago I had a startup and I had to hire my first 15 people in Dublin. It was whoever I could meet in the ecosystem that I could get. In the last week, we put an ad up on Upwork. We got 76 applications on Thursday. We interviewed 4 on Friday, and George from Georgia started on Monday within 2 days, and world-class engineer, and he's checking code Tuesday. So the speed of agility in terms of recruiting, if you change your mindset, so actually we're used to being fragmented the whole time. So we're getting on a plane, but actually now there's a SaaSification of the business, where the average business now has 76 SaaS solutions within the business. So whether it's Slack, Figma, all of these online collaboration tools, don't be constrained by what's here in Berlin, what's in Paris. Yes, you need to plug in as a founder and as a CEO, you probably need to plug into these certain hubs. If you're an engineer, think of it as like a router. There's certain flows of people, data, and information and money through these like hotspots. You need to plug in there, but your team can be sitting in the south of France. Like we have a team member now sitting in Bangladesh, one in New York, one in south of Ireland, one in Dublin, one in Czech Republic, and the team came together in 4 weeks. So actually spinning up a startup 10 years later after spinning it up last time is so much easier this time. And in Europe, and I raise money from the US. So you can play that perfect arbitrage. Raise from the US, be in Berlin, have your network, and have your team everywhere else. And no one's going after that team because they're all sitting in back arse of wherever they are around Europe. And they're having a great time. One's in Montenegro because he loves hill walking for 4 hours every day. So you can have his lifestyle and be a brilliant engineer. So there's these amazing opportunities that's just democratized across whether you're the US or here. But you need to still plug into those networks of capital, of VC, and particularly San Francisco's biggest advantage we don't talk about is customers. If you're doing enterprise sales, you will land in San Francisco and someone will become a customer faster and with a bigger invoice than if you're trying to sell to an early stage, like a bank in Paris or a bank in Germany or a bank in Ireland. Whereas you land Silicon Valley Bank, my last startup, were a customer for a 6-figure deal after meeting them twice. I got my first 100K deal was in California, in LA, in 24 hours. It took me like 6 months to get a 10K deal in Ireland. So think of that from your customer perspective as well. So your salespeople might need to be nearer to the customers, which is where America is, and they have less risk and they'll buy faster. But I think everything else is now becoming more of a leveling field as far as I'm concerned. But you still want to plug into the hubs. So if you're going to France, if you're in Paris, I know you need to join Family and go to Station F. You know, it's in Techstars plays that we're like nodes of networks into this global network. And I think where we all play is access to that wider network and expertise and mentorship. But there's a lot of opportunities for founders now with hiring and being more creative around how they organize their teams.
I want to ask a bit more about this particular point around growth. I think for many founders there is a path that is not linked to funding, to VCs. It's to actually have customers. And what you were just describing is like, okay, in the US could go that fast. Here in Europe with B2B enterprise could be super slow. I wanted to ask you, how is it for you? Like at Station F, are you actually helping those founders like conquer new markets? Get new kingdoms, that type of thing?
Yeah, so actually Station F has been completely international since day one, and I think that's something that people have a hard time wrapping their head around because they see the French ecosystem and they think it's very Franco-French, but actually not at all the case, at least at Station F, not at all the case, at TheFamily probably not at all the case either. And so I think a lot of people actually when they come to Station F, they're surprised. We have 4,500 people that work out of our campus every day, 600 people who speak no French. So everything that we do is in English. Every single partner, brand, fund, everyone that works at Station F or that contributed to the project, we actually validated to make sure they had an international network strategy, something international that they would bring to the table so that we wouldn't just be limiting the startups in our space to the French ecosystem and French market. And what's been really interesting for me to see is also how this has gained a lot of international attraction. When people come to France now, and we often joke about this, but we've had a lot of presidents, prime ministers, dukes, princes, whatever, come to Station F and visit. I mentioned we had Jack Dorsey last week, but the Monday just before that, we had the new president of Ukraine that was here. So people actually joke that if there's someone you want to meet in your country, you actually have a better chance of meeting them at Station F, and it actually usually happens to be the case. So I think this is also something that Connor just addressed, like it's really important to gain access to customers and what have you, and I think having a hub like that attracts so many people also gives way to those opportunities.
I'd like to, I don't know, you wanted to react, Ron? No, you're good, sorry. I want to continue with a big area for Europe to kind of lead and also make sure that this entire industry is going in the right direction and involve as many people who are willing to join. One of the startups in our program called Seret AI, they are from Sweden, they do this analysis of media, video content in particular, and they did a paper for like BBC saying that 25% of the time spent in Game of Thrones speaking were by women, even though you have big characters in the series that are women. So what can we do for women in tech in Europe in particular? What are your organizations doing? I want to ask you first, Alice, because you just launched Gold Up recently. So tell us, about your experience and things that can be still done, to bring more women on board.
Okay, so at TheFamily, we've been accompanying 600 startups. Out of the 600, how many, in terms of percentage, were founded by female? Guess.
5, 7.
They all know it. Okay, it's 5%. 5%. So that's a shame, and I feel I've been with my team thinking of what can we do to change that. And so basically we started different programs, 2 of them that are also in Berlin. One is Sistership. So it's an open conference, a series of conferences with inspiring leaders, female leaders and founders. It's happening every month. And Roxanne is coming to the next one in Paris. So this is to get a more role model. Okay, we know it's very important. And the second one is a bit specific. It's called Gold Up. The Old Up of Girls. So it's a boot camp during 5 weeks, 5 Saturdays, where we just tell the girl, you know what? Forget about building $1 billion company. We won't talk about that. We won't talk about building this startup. We will talk about building a profitable online business. Let's start from there. And for me, as the CEO of TheFamily, where we encourage women to be really ambitious from day one, this was a little bit hard to go through this path, but I decided to test and not to look at it like philosophically speaking, and just to test. And I received 200 applications. I selected 55, and it just started in Paris, a new session a week ago. And the level of energy that I'm getting there is just crazy. We'll see where the business are going. We'll see. And I think it's a long-term game. But this is another experimentation that we're trying. So I'm really on the ground, trying to do tons of stuff to see where we can have much more female getting into entrepreneurship without judging. And that's the thing, because we have tons of biases, and I think I have tons of biases also myself, being surrounded only by male, and and in my team, for sure I have biases. So I'm trying stuff. Gold Up.
Also, in Game of Thrones, there is only two black characters. I learned that recently. I'd like to ask you, Roxanne, about also women, but also diversity in a global point of view. You have many actions or different programs at Station F to add.
Yeah, so actually diversity has been incredibly important to us from day one. First, because I think Station F would really suck if the 4,500 people all had the exact same profile. And also because no innovation would ever come out of that group. So I think when we approach diversity, obviously we're looking at gender diversity, we're also looking at an international community, we're looking at people from underprivileged backgrounds as well. So we have 1/3 of our community that comes from outside of France today. The countries that are the most represented in order are the US, China, and Morocco, so very diverse. I think Germany is in the top 10. You guys are number 10 on the list, so I'm hoping that will move up. In terms of women, we've actually seen a huge progression. So I mentioned earlier that we have 30 different programs on campus. 5 of them actually have over 45% of the companies founded by women. So We are seeing some industries and some approaches that are working better than others. A company at Station F will never be selected because there's a female in the team, but because it's a quality company. So I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind also when we're doing different outreach methods for women as well. And finally, we've also launched a program to address underprivileged entrepreneurs. We went out of our way not to define what it means to be underprivileged, because really it can be anybody who's been through a difficult situation. And we also integrate these people into an existing program so that we don't have them sitting in a corner going, you guys are underprivileged, because that defeats the whole purpose. And what we've seen is, for example, a former prisoner who's currently working on a startup. We have a former homeless person who's working on a startup. And all of these people coexist in the Station F community. And I just wanted to come back to the topic of females specifically, because I think there's two ways to really approach and change things, and I think Alice, especially with Gold Up and some of the things that they're doing at TheFamily, is doing a terrific job. But I think one is really around having role models, promoting these role models, but not just promoting them for the sake of them being visible, but encouraging also women to pick other women up with them and other people from the industry. I also think sometimes we have a women versus men approach, and that gets us literally nowhere, because it's a joint discussion that we need to be having. So I think role models, and also pulling people up, encouraging people to join us whenever it's possible.
Anyone want to react to this, Yoram?
Yeah, I just wanted to add a little anecdote, if I may, about this. So I came by train from Amsterdam to Berlin, and had a meeting in Essen, which is in the Ruhrgebiet of Germany. So that's where they used to dig up all the coal and where all the steel mills were. And that industry has completely collapsed. So unemployment huge. There's also a lot of refugee communities and Syrian communities. And yeah, overall, that whole area became a bit, yeah, let's say, underserved and isolated from what's happening in Berlin and Munich in the startup world. And so, I had a meeting there with the government. They really actually have put their hopes on startups, because this region is now starting to bounce back, and it actually has been thanks to some startups that have come actually out of nowhere. So yeah, I think where we also want to do is help these regions in any way we can. We can put them on the map. We can help them through content, but there's a big opportunity there. And actually, also Berlin has now a huge startup scene, but that also kind of came from a position of being actually kind of behind. And they turned it into that being a strength.
I'd like to get questions from the audience. You know that you can join on Slido and ask the questions, upvote those you like. There are already a few. I'm going to take the first one immediately. Okay, so questions coming from Anirban Sa. Is it only about geographic challenge, or is it more about the cultural difference? For example, an international needs a German co-founder to have a business. Geography versus cultural difference. Connor, I see that you're looking at it like you can talk about German co-founders.
Well, actually, is it only about geographic challenge, or is it more about the cultural difference? I don't think you need to have a German co-founder. The question's there's a bit broad in there.
Yeah, there's two things here in the question. But basically, like if I would say something very stupid just for the sake of making it easy, if I go to the north, it's so cold in winter that you have to be building your product, right? If I go to the south, in my dear friends of Spain, in winter they just can also enjoy life. So that is it a big thing, or it's more cultural difference that I would say could be?
Yeah. So I think we're all here to help entrepreneurs succeed, and I think so entrepreneurs come from different backgrounds, different cultural perspectives. So if you want to be a smart and successful investor, you have to be very open to that. I think, especially at early stage. But I know for the first time when I ran my first program here in Berlin, there was a bit of shock and feedback from some of the local investors when they met the first 10 teams at the rollout, and there wasn't one German company. And they were like, "You're running a program in Berlin, there's no German company." I was like, "Well, we picked the 10 best. You know, we had like 700 applications, we picked the best, and they were like, well, surely the Germans are the best. You know what I mean? You got to have German companies there. So there's a bit of shock, I think, from some of the investors on that side. And I think, yeah, I see it as an advantage. I actually think people who have biases are missing out massive opportunities to invest. I think people who are like, oh, I'm just going to invest in German startups here in Berlin, but not going to fly to Ukraine or to Bulgaria or to Madrid and look and find those great startups or use Deal Room. I think because the entrepreneurship is so distributed now, that if you have that bias, you're going to miss out. Like one of the most successful companies in Europe right now is UiPath, which is in Romania, you know, and I think they still have most of their teams and people in Romania. So opportunity is spread out across the world. So I think if you can navigate that and embrace that and enjoy interacting with it, it'll help you as an investor, which should be good for founders. But that's my perspective personally. Yeah.
Caddy is also asking about that ankle. How is it going?
The ankle is good. I think your question is, why do you think networks are so important? I think you spend 20 years in your career maybe as a PhD, or you're an expert in a certain area. You're an expert in what you do, but there's a whole new world of how to set up an early stage company, whether it's fundraising, recruiting, dealing with the press. There's a whole new skill set. So if you can tap into that network, that's a huge advantage. And actually, Katie, I know, is a mentor at Techstars as well, and setting up a female-only pre-accelerator program here in Berlin. So maybe she wants me to advertise that. But network, I look back, and everyone in this room, if you understand the network question, look back in your own life. How did you meet your partner? How did you get the job? How did you find out about this opportunity? What brought you to Berlin? Network has been part of so many successful moments in my own personal life. And every point of failure where I failed, fucked up, got fired, lost, was because I didn't have the mentorship or the network around me to say, Conor, you're being a dick, you're being stupid, whatever else it is. Because I was starting my first startup in the south of Ireland where there was no other entrepreneurs, there was no accelerators, no community, there was no family, there was no factory, there was no deal room. There was a few blogs emerging. So now there's amazing network around you. And I think Sam Altman, going back to YC, we're all here, we're all in the same ship. He left YC recently. His closing quote was, money and advice is now a commodity. Network is your durable advantage. So network is what's going to get your jobs into the future. And if you think of it like the Uberization, we're all gig economy, 50% of us are going to be working freelance. Those opportunities come through your network. So I cannot see in any scenario where network or building or strengthening your network wouldn't be advantageous or important. And an important skill as a founder, whether you like it or not, you have to do it.
I think we have a great group to answer questions from Carla about the impact of Brexit on the ecosystem. Have you seen changes? Like, for example, Roxanne, you know, startups from the UK coming to Station F, like, please give us asylum?
Yeah, so actually we have seen more and more companies, at least when they apply to Station F programs, they tell us Brexit, Donald Trump, and high prices in Silicon Valley have been a factor in their decision to apply and to come to Paris. With regards to Brexit specifically, we have not seen that many companies actually pick up and leave the UK, but rather companies that would have initially gone there are no longer considering London or the UK as a viable option.
Any other feedback in this group, Yoram?
I just would like to challenge that a little bit, because I think that the UK is like the crown jewel in European tech. And like we talked about earlier, you know, we should remove barriers, and in the end, I mean, Brexit sucks, but maybe in the day-to-day life of a startup, it actually doesn't maybe matter that much. I think, you know, if you have, if you make it harder for or less attractive for skilled people from India, or for example, to come to the UK, that's disastrous, of course. But overall, maybe it doesn't really affect us that much, and the UK is still doing really well.
I'd like to take one last question. I see that there are several for you, Yoram, about Deal Room. You'll be around, right? Like, if they want to ask you more things about how Deal Room work,
no,
they can come to you and ask you directly.
Yep.
I see there's like 6 votes for this question from female founder. It's about, you know, access to capital for female founders in particular. What is your opinion that, you know, we need to do to make it easier? Like, I know that the numbers are not really good. Like, it looks harder for female founders to get access to capital. That would be the last question I ask you before, like, we wrap up. So who wants to grab the mic?
If the VC were female founders as well, it would be easier. It's really about who pick who. If you're the only woman in a room and you have only men in front of you, you have a few chances, really a few. So who are the investors? So we need more female investors. That's really what I think. And I also tend to think that we need to also, we women, redefine our own way of what it means to be ambitious, what ambition means. And it doesn't have to look exactly like what we see today. What is ambition? Okay. I don't have the answer exactly now. The only thing is focusing only on the outcome and on the results might not be the way we see it.
Anyone else want to contribute to this question? Otherwise, I'll ask you a final quick word, like what are you looking for here and what can these people help you with? Like very quickly, and we wrap it up. So Connor, you're here in Berlin, so maybe we can just go for, your knowledge, expertise, and network directly, right?
I live in Berlin for the last 5 years, so my German is en petit peu. I'm looking to be part of the network here to understand this ecosystem, support it, make it more successful, and help entrepreneurs succeed. So that's here anywhere, so I can help.
Okay, thank you, Alice. What are you looking for here, and what can they
Inspiration,
get from you?
learning, inspiration. I love the fact that we mix different communities, and that's very something that we share at the family, is to have people with different background. I mean, I'm from the community. My co-founder is a serial entrepreneur. The other one is an author, a writer. So I like when you have a mix of different kind of people, and that's why I'm really cool. I'm really happy to be here.
And you're cool too. Yoram, your turn.
Can I say the same? Sorry, very boring.
The same as Alice. What about you, Roxanne?
I guess I'll be more blunt. We have 12 German companies today at Station F. We would love to have more. If you guys are interested in expanding, considering growing in France, we'd love to talk to you.
They can quickly, easily apply to Station F. Exactly.
And live there.
And live there. 600 flats, 450 euros, that's the price?
399.
399, okay. That's all for us today. We'll be around, you'll be around. If you want to talk to them, grab them somewhere. I don't know if we have the right to stay there. In the meantime, thank you very much for joining us today. Give them a very warm applause. Thank you.